Okay, so this is the video that I promised that I was going to make on resources for learning Icelandic. And in a non-corona world, I would have lots of physical resources that I would be using to demonstrate this, but I'm currently very far away from most of my possessions, although much luckier than many. So this is a bit of an ad hoc one, but I'm going to put links down below for the resources that I refer to. And I'll also return to this in a few months, maybe 6 months, with an updated version, because I am also on a quest for Icelandic learning resources. So this is both like an offering up of what I have, what I know, and also a request for any other tips of resources for Icelandic, learning Icelandic for beginners. I think the one thing that a lot of people have noted when learning Icelandic, learning a language spoken by comparatively so few people, approximately 380,000 people in the world, is that there aren't the kind of extensive resources and language learning tools that you would find if you were starting a language like French or Russian or Mandarin. One thing to say in Iceland's defense, for a language that's spoken by so few people, there have been some really great initiatives for people wanting to learn Icelandic. It is one of the components for applying for citizenship. Please let me have citizenship, Iceland. Really, I'm trying to cool it with my desperation to become an Icelandic citizen. But also, I am also learning Icelandic because I want to become an Icelandic citizen, because it is such an amazing place. So there are actually quite a lot of government-sponsored Icelandic language learning resources for non-native speakers. There's not anything akin to the Ulpan program in Israel for new immigrants, but there are a lot of both kind of semi-public and private initiatives. There are some language schools in the summer, which I'll make a separate video on, none of which I have any affiliation to whatsoever. And the resources I'm referring to here, I have not been paid to promote any of them. I have no association with anyone involved. So these are just my perspectives on what is useful for Icelandic language learning. There's a TV program from the early 2000s. How time flies. I like to think, I basically still think I'm 16 and it's 2001. Everything else has just been a really extended remix of me being 16. Called Viltu læra Islensku, not sure if I've done the case right there, which is a series of episodes, real life episodes with real life Icelandic actors, with but designed for non-native speakers, with both English and Icelandic subtitles. They aired on Icelandic television, but you can find copies of it, and it's very useful for picking up very slow, very clear Icelandic, but spoken by native speakers, and with little bits of slang thrown in, which is cute. Come on. You've been to downtown Reykjavik. Oh, you're so street. Yeah. It's just adorable. It's Icelandic hip hop. I should make a separate video on. And another one is that there's a web resource, a course that actually is, I think was at least developed by the Icelandic Ministry of Education. So it's the program that the government itself thinks that non-native speakers who are wanting to integrate or move here or apply for citizenship should do, which is called, Icelandic for all, Íslenska fyrir alla. I've kind of played around with that, and that's a very good resource. So those are two that are sort of the official ones. And then there are some summer schools which I'll put some links to. Obviously for 2020 everything is different. I don't know whether or not the language schools are running or not. My plan was to go to a language school this summer, although I'm very lucky because I am around a lot of Icelandic speakers. a lot of the time, who are very patient with my questions. One thing to note is that like there aren't nearly as many that like English to Icelandic textbooks, and it's very, very hard if you're trying to. I've got an Italian friend. If you're trying to find a sort of to Icelandic not from English, that's very, very hard, and I have to apologize. I'm not the person to talk about resources for that. Also apps, like, so I've been talking to lots of people about like what language apps they use, and if you are used to like Duolingo, I know there's like a big debate about which language app is best. I'm not sponsored by any of them. I don't have a dog in that fight. I just want to get vocab in my brain, so I like play around with different ones. I do actually really have a favorite one, but I don't want to seem like I'm like preaching about it. Duolingo does not, as far as I know, currently have an Icelandic one. There's a big debate on all the Duolingo forums, like, why don't you have an Icelandic one? Or people saying, and this is a separate debate to have later, like, what language should I learn then to like make Icelandic easier for me when the time comes? Which is like a bit hardcore to like learn a whole other language to then make Icelandic slightly easier. But there are long and short answers to that. The short answer is Danish. But yeah. But Memrise does. I've looked at that with some native speakers, and some of the vocab didn't seem to quite like cohere with like how Icelandic is actually spoken, but I'm not an expert. And then there's Drops. That's the one I use. Let me bring it up. Oh, it says I've had all my Icelandic for the day. But like when you do this, you play around like, can you see this? Let me write the word. So I should have picked any other word in the world. And then you kind of pick like mandla, which is the word for almond. It's cute and interactive. It's free for 5 minutes a day. You get like little bursts of it, or you pay and you can use like an unlimited one. I found Drops very, very good for Icelandic learning, and a couple of other languages. I use it for like 15 languages. So I'm saying I'm actually addicted to Drops. So yeah, Drops is one I found that's good, because they've seemed to have put a lot of work into making it like Icelandic specific. I do think a problem with a lot of the resources is that they're made by people who are making resources for Norwegian, Swedish and Danish, and then they're just like tacking Icelandic onto it like a little Cinderella. It's like, Icelandic is its own thing, you know? Don't just like drag it into like the Nordic world. So yeah, I found those helpful. Memrise and Drops. And then there are lots of different, there's a cool podcast that I'll link to. And then the other thing is that one thing that's very special about Iceland, there are so many things that are special about Iceland. Please give me citizenship. One thing that's very special about Iceland is, of course, the amount of music that is produced in Icelandic. And I found that really helpful, really, really useful. I mean, I happen to like really love Björk and the Sugar Cubes that came, she was in the band that she was in before that, and a lot of like the cool stuff that was happening here in like the 80s and 90s. So I happen to enjoy really listening to that. But that is one of the kind of richnesses of like the very creative culture, is that you can like there's a vast like array of music to listen to that can kind of get you going with the language. To talk about the kind of social aspect of it, Icelandic people have always been incredibly welcoming and kind and generous with their time with me, and I felt very kind of welcomed here. I love the kind of egalitarianism of it going off to England. It's like a real sort of breath of fresh air, and I really value the sort of like, in a really positive way, like community-mindedness of everyone kind of looking out for everyone. Like half the people I know are in like the mountain search rescue. And people have been incredibly kind and helpful to me in my attempts to learn Icelandic. One thing that is like difficult about being in a place where everyone's level of English is so high, like everyone's, is that it, like, people default to English very quickly as soon as they hear that you're not a native speaker of Icelandic, and English really is like the lingua franca of Iceland. So it would be a lot easier for you to learn Icelandic if you didn't know English. It's also not a very daily life is not very multilingual, even though a lot of Icelandic people are very educated. They will often know, almost every Icelandic person I know knows some like German or Danish or Spanish, because they're going on holiday to Spain. But it's not a very, compared to a lot of places I lived, where like the richness of many different languages is sort of part of the fabric of life, and so stimulating. Iceland really kind of just has signs in Icelandic and in English, and then historical documents in Danish. I have started to see like some Polish signs around, which is very cool. The Polish population here, and some of my friends are like Polish, applying for Icelandic citizenship, and that's a bit kind of kind of thread to follow through. I've also been trying to learn Polish, so that's been very interesting for me. But that's something I've noticed. Like, English is really the lingua franca, and it does make it a little bit hard to learn Icelandic because Icelandic people generally speak such good English. About the question of whether to learn another North Germanic language in order to improve your chances of then learning Icelandic, I personally think that's incredibly extreme, and I love learning languages. It's kind of like, I don't know, training to be an astronaut in order to one day, be a ballerina. Like, it's like so really intense. Like, learn one of those languages because you want to learn those languages. Otherwise, like, your heart will not be in it. And I don't think it gives you that much of an inroad into Icelandic. About 6 months ago, I started to teach myself Swedish, Norwegian, and Danish, as in literally on that drops actually like 5 minutes a day, practicing some Danish, Norwegian, and Swedish. I found Swedish pronunciation very difficult. I found it something to do with the chasm between the alphabet and the pronunciation quite hard to wrap my head around. I found Norwegian, I was learning nynorsk, and Danish easier. But then when it came to learning Icelandic, I mean, also because I hadn't gotten those up to anything beyond absolute beginner level, I didn't think that it was much of an inroad at all. And I don't think that is a sensible idea before moving to Iceland. And we all have our own different reasons for learning languages. Some of us learn it for work, for research, for travel, all sorts of different things. And I'm not judging why anyone would ever start to learn a language. It's all about finding, the right approach for you. But I think that learning a language in order to then make another language easier seems like an incredibly circuitous endeavor, and one where it seems unlikely that you would enjoy either the experience or, for instance, learning Norwegian to one day open up Icelandic, which means that you'd be less likely to stick to it, and wouldn't be kind of very fruitful when you're here. One thing I found, so many of my Icelandic friends do have sort of heritage, where they'll have a Norwegian grandmother, a Danish grandparent. There's a historically, before 1944, the historical relationship between Iceland and Denmark. So as someone who studies law, I have thought that maybe learning some Danish would be helpful for me, so that I can read the old constitution and this kind of thing, the old laws. But yeah, I don't think that learning a language to open up another language is a wise idea. But give it a go if that appeals to you. Those are also three, fascinating, beautiful languages in themselves that have their own rich and complex histories. But for now, I'm sticking with Icelandic. And yeah, I hope these descriptions of the resources have been useful, and I'll make another video in about 6 months when I can report back on all the other resources that I found and any tips that anyone sent to me as well. Cool.